I have a couple of confessions to make at first. One is I'm not a public speaker. This is a foreign environment for me. So whatever your expectations are, I hope they're met, but I won't be surprised. Second, I don't go to book signings as a general rule, so I have no idea what goes on at these. So I'm going to do what I feel comfortable doing, and I hope it works. However this turns out, I will make one guarantee, and that is that the book is better than the presentation. So I guess the moral is, so far, don't judge a book by its author. Probably the first question some people will ask is, why do we need another book about James Meredith and the riot at Ole Miss in 1962? When I started working on this book about 1991, not working intensely, but that was when I first started kind of playing with the topic. There were already 4 books out. This book is published in 2009, and there are in the interim 4 more books on roughly the topic or something closely related. And there's just been another book on the topic published. So why this one? Why should you read this one? Well, I think first of all you need to understand that this is not a book about James Meredith, and it's not a book about the riot. Over the years, people have asked me many times, you're working on a book about James Meredith or the riot, and my reaction was one of variation of really a couple of things. I would either say, yeah, that's right, and go on if I didn't want to take the time to explain, or I would say, no, it's not really about that, but that's involved. So what I did in the book, I think, makes it different and maybe will interest you. My primary motive originally was to explain why the riot took place in 1962. And I don't mean in terms of immediate causes, but I mean in terms of long-range causes. How can we understand this? So what I try and do in the book is explain the confluence, the coming together of race, politics, and Ole Miss in 1962. And to do that, I had to back up and look at events dealing with the university and race and politics since World War II, and trace those and show people how all those ingredients fit together. And that's important because it's the context that is vitally important to understanding why Meredith, his actions in 1962 coming to the university, had the result it did. James Meredith by himself could not have caused the controversy. It's the context of Mississippi in the 1950s and early 60s that produces the controversy. It's that social, cultural situation that he inserts himself in that triggers the reaction. So that's one thing I think I do that is quite different in this book than what anybody else has done. I try and let the reader see what Mississippi in the 1950s and early 60s was like. Jim Silver, the professor at the university, described this in the mid-1960s as Mississippi, the closed society. Well, I don't want to tell you about it, I want to show you. And so I study a number of incidents and watch them build. The second thing that I do that I think a number of people haven't done, is I do focus on James Meredith. And in focusing on him, I examine him as a real person more than others have. He's not a caricature, he's not a stereotype, he's not what people think he is. I wanted to explain him as he really was. And I benefit greatly from an interview with him and from having access to his personal papers, which no one else has done. And the third thing is, I had the good fortune to have access to lots of sources no one else has looked at. In 1991, when I first started this, I can identify the beginning date in a way because that's when I first asked the FBI for the Meredith file. And it took more than a decade to get all those papers. They filled 3 file drawers. And no one else had ever asked for the papers, no one else had ever seen them. I also got papers from the United States Marshal Service, I had access to the university files at the university, which no one had ever seen. I had access to state documents and state records here that no one had ever seen. So the research for this is, I hope you will see if you look at the footnotes. A lot of people don't bother with footnotes. Some of us, that's what attracts us to books. If you look at the footnotes, you will, I hope, appreciate that the research is very wide and very deep, and in sources that no one else has looked at. This allows me, as I say, to show the reader what happened instead of just tell. I don't label people, I don't pass judgment on them, as much as I just let the characters walk through the book and do what they did and say what they did. And you are, I hope, I'm confident that you're smart enough to see and make your own evaluation of them. I don't like people and authors who tell you something but don't really tell you why you should think or come to that conclusion. So the context here is essential, and the context is, I think, very rich and detailed. So how is the book organized? What does it do? I'm going to read only one passage from the book at the end. I hope you'll read the book. But let me tell you what it's about if you have not started it, and I assume most of you are like my students. You have not done the reading assignment for today, so I'm not going to be going over things that you've already read. The book is divided into three parts. The first part is about race and Ole Miss. It is about what happened at the university from the late 1940s up to Meredith's application dealing with race. And this is where someone who did not live through the period or someone who is unfamiliar with Mississippi in that period can learn what it was like. Not by my telling them, but by my showing them. So we see the university enduring a series of crises involving the student newspaper, involving university athletics, involving religion on campus, involving free speech, involving a whole host of issues and controversies beginning in the late 40s. And those crises build in scope and intensity, and so we begin to see then that what happens in 1962 is almost the culmination of them. It wasn't predictable, but certainly it did not come as a surprise if you had seen all these other things happening. I start with a description of the university generally, Ole Miss, and then move through all these years in the 1950s. One of the things that becomes evident is that beginning in the early 1950s, the chancellor and the administration of the university gradually yield to political forces in the state, whether they're on the board of trustees or whether it's the governor or whomever. And so gradually the chancellor and the administration lose control over their institution. So by 1962, and the controversy involving James Meredith, the administration and the university are in many ways not even key actors. The actors are the board of trustees, the legislature, the governor, and others, not the university. The second section of the book introduces James Meredith. He has not appeared in the first half dozen or so chapters. There is a biographical chapter on Meredith in which I explain his family background, who his grandparents were, who his parents were, what they did for a living. They farmed in Atala County. His father and mother were independent landowners, which set them apart. His father registered to vote about 1920 in Atala County, a rarity. But that should give the reader some indication of how independent and sturdy a man his father was. Now, that is one example of the research. To prove that James Meredith's father had registered to vote, you have to go to the county courthouse in Atala County and go through the voting registration books until you find Mr. Meredith. As far as I know, no one has ever done that. And to verify that he was an independent landowner, you have to look at the land deeds and follow those through the years. So that's the kind of research that undergirds this. Then I spend 2 chapters on what might at first seem like a rather uninteresting topic, and that is Meredith's lawsuit to get in the University of Mississippi.